Welcome to the Risk Insight, a Crisis 24 podcast taking a closer look at the risk and security issues facing organizations around the world today. And now, here's your host, Mo French.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Risk Insight. I'm your host, Mo French, and I'm very excited to introduce my co-host for today's episode, Neil Sachs. Neil is a strategic account manager here at Crisis 24 and has been supporting the NFL since the kickoff of their program. Thanks for co-hosting with me today, Neil.
Thanks, Mo. It's my pleasure to join you in the booth for this episode with the NFL. Really excited to dive right in. So how about you kick us off here?
Absolutely. Today, we're going to talk about managing risk for the National Football League. As you can imagine, this is no small feat, given the number and variety of events and interests that the NFL carries throughout the year. To join us in today's discussion, we're so excited to welcome Rob Gummer from the NFL. Rob has a dual role with the NFL, both as the Director of Intelligence Operations as well as the Director of the Global Security Operations Center. So just two very small jobs. Welcome to the Risk Insight, Rob.
Happy to be here and join you guys this morning. Very excited to chat with you guys.
Rob, before we begin chatting about the specifics of the NFL's risk management program, do you mind taking a few minutes to share with our listeners a glimpse into your background, which ultimately led you to the role with the league today?
No, happy to do so, Neil. It's an interesting tale, just because I think it speaks to the random occurrences that happen early in life and how it really kind of leads you into different places, and eventually, here at the NFL. So I grew up in Ohio. I actually grew up most of my childhood in Canton, Ohio, which is pretty funny now, thinking about where I am. But at the time, the NFL was nowhere on my radar. I was very much thinking about a career in the FBI. That was something I wanted to do since I was 8 years old, specifically because of the X-Files and not because of something heroic. But that kind of drove me, and I was fortunate enough in high school to get a mentor who was the head of the Canton office at the time, and more or less asked him, like, how do I pursue a career in the FBI? He pointed me actually in the direction of the military, specifically military intelligence. And after that conversation, I dropped all school plans and went straight for the military. So in 98, I joined the Army, went to become an all-source analyst. I was deployed for the first time at age 19 to Kosovo, and we were actually the first unit to go in as the Serbian army was leaving the country. And then that was kind of my first real experience working command center operations. And it turns out I was really good at it, so much so I ended up becoming a command briefer. And there was a funny story on the side. It actually ended up having Thanksgiving dinner with Madeleine Albright in 99 because I was
kidding.
I was the soldier of the task force because I had a good photographic memory. And that was like my reward when Madeleine Albright, Bill Clinton, and Chelsea Clinton came out to visit the troops. Fast forward, at age 21, I was a sergeant, and the plan was to actually get out of the military in 2002. But 9/11 happened, was shifted like everything. And as an intel professional, there actually was not a way to get out of the military, stop loss, essentially. So I asked to go back to Germany. My first couple of years were in Germany. Within less than a year's time, actually within 4 months, I was back in Kosovo again, 2002, 2003. At that point in time, I was a staff sergeant, so I was running our command center and supporting those operations. Then, as I was out there, the Iraq War kicked off. And at the end of deployment, we were essentially told we're going to Iraq in the next 3 or 4 months. And I would say a lot of my command center knowledge was shaped by that time period, just because there's so many different things going on, from unrest. We were there for the first Iraqi democratic elections. There was the rise of Al Qaeda in Iraq. So there's a lot of different threats and things going all over the place. And it was a fascinating time. When I left the military, I ended up teaching at the military intel school for about a year before I taught surveillance systems for a couple of years. 2009, joined the FBI in Las Vegas. and I was super excited because that was my dream, and I chose to work and volunteer for all the things. So anytime there was an opportunity to work something different, because I just wanted to learn, I would work anything from gangs to public corruption to counterterrorism, the counterintelligence. I just wanted to know all aspects of the FBI. In 2012, ended up becoming a supervisor in San Diego, working criminal enterprises and gangs, but also had the opportunity to more or less reboot how the San Diego Fusion Center was working, particularly on the intelligence side and the connectivity regionally. So again, another, I guess, background experience that kind of led me to this point. In 2015, was asked to come out to DC to partake in what we call an inspection team. Is essentially you audit and diagnose intelligence programs and just functions of the office in general, from leadership to effectiveness to everything that an FBI office is expected to do. Was really good at that and was identified as someone who could take over the FBI's intelligence tool portfolio, particularly on the analytics side. So that was all the open source tools, the geospatial tools, big data analytics tools, and that was almost, I think, like 40 different individual projects that impacted the entirety of the organization. So again, another experience that at the time was kind of incubated, but ended up really having a big impact on where I am now. And then just the randomness of life, my last job, I was the FBI's expert on emerging tech. So I was a senior national intelligence officer for science and technology. So that was everything from 5G to quantum computing. And it just so happened that for whatever reason, they couldn't get someone to speak at the Global Security Exchange in Las Vegas. And they had this whole segment on emerging tech. And I did it as a favor because that week I was actually supposed to brief the Attorney General on 5G vulnerabilities. And unbeknownst to me, my current boss, Kathleen Neer, was in the audience, had heard about it. We had never actually crossed paths prior to that. And she happened to be in the front row of my presentation. And it was a packed house. Had no idea she was there. And then a week and a half later, I get a call from the NFL saying that Kathy wanted to meet with me. We met like the following week, and the rest is history. I got offered a job on the spot. And it was the craziest thing because I had no desire actually to leave the FBI. I was FBI for life. But it was one of those things that at that point in my life, one of my dreams was running my own intelligence program. And I was working my way up to run the FBI's intelligence program. But to have the opportunity to do something from scratch on a canvas like the NFL, you can't pass that up. That's an unprecedented opportunity. And it was something I had to take that leap of faith on.
Wow. Well, clearly it's worked out for you. So I have two comments. Number one is absolutely incredible background. I don't think there's anybody listening that would question why you have the roles that you do in two roles at the NFL based on that background. And then second point being that I think I need to go back and put some more stuff into my career because it feels like you've had 5 careers up until this point. So it's pretty impressive. Wow. And thank you for your service as well. We always want to recognize our military and service members here at Crisis 24. So why don't we start our discussion with a little background, just to set the stage on the NFL. So we know it's a complex program, and there's a lot of moving parts that you have responsibility for. So maybe you can share with our listeners a little bit about the league's overall responsibilities, really both in the season and off season as well.
Yeah, so I think the average listener would definitely be aware of the season. That's the most obvious thing that goes on. It's all over TV. All of the pundits and chatter and stuff is focused on what's going on those games. When there is an off season, which is, I guess, the way to break it down for the casual audience, 6 months out of the year is the season. A year is literally split in half. The other half is what they consider the off season, but there's still very much important activities that go on along that time period. So most folks would know about the combine. Because again, that's another thing that's very publicized. Folks would know about the NFL draft, which is becoming an increasingly larger event. It used to be just a thing that occurred in New York, but now it's its own massive entity. And I've had the opportunity to witness kind of like the growth, even though 2020 threw a wrench into some of the plans, and we had our first virtual draft, but that in itself is I would say, Super Bowl light in terms of planning. And then everything else that happens in between where the public doesn't see is planning for the next season. Super Bowl planning takes place a year out. Draft planning takes place over a year out. Planning for our international games also happens during that time period. Connecting with law enforcement partners, connecting with the cities that we're going to be operating in. There's a lot of logistics that go on in order to make what folks see on the public side work. And there's it's like a bee's nest, a lot of busy bees making things so it's agnostic to the general public, but it's a lot of work.
Thanks for that background. It's apparent that there are plenty of logistics in play here. On that note, Rob, what kind of collaborations throughout the season in preparation for all these different types of events does the GSOC team work directly with the franchises? I think about where there are boundaries, if any, on what is the league's responsibility versus the stadium and or team owner's responsibility for the community.
It's an interesting question. I think that's something we're still trying to figure out. For the audience, this program's only been up for 3 years now. So year one was kind of like our season one, if you will, was kind of like an intro to the league and understanding the different dynamics and pieces and parts. Year two was a pandemic. So it was unprecedented for the clubs and the stadiums and the owners and the league at large, and also for us being year two, and we ended up becoming a critical component for not just the league when it comes to monitoring for issues and things that keep our games and events safe, but also for those partners as well. So coming into this season, we are kind of like the hub for all the things because a lot of the teams and the stadiums don't have the expertise our team has. Particularly when you're thinking about handling online threats, some of the investigation things, if someone's accounts or whatnot gets hacked, extortion, what have you. So we do support our primary, customer, our league staff and employees, but we very much support all of our stadium and club partners on all the things all the time. So perfect example, this season we've had a host of field incursions. For those who are unaware, that means when a fan hops from the audience and runs across the football field. One of the things that the stadiums and the teams kind of rely on us for is to identify, folks kind of, talking about things like that on social media, even things that might seem kind of normal, say on the college side, like pulling down a goalpost. If there's a bunch of chatter and folks like, oh, we're going to pull down the goalpost after the game, that's a fan safety issue, right? And it's a safety issue for the players and everyone else is involved. So we didn't fill in that hole. I think because we exist and we have the skills and capabilities that we do right now, there's a lot of deference to us to kind of be that arbiter that handles a lot of those things. But we very much are kind of like the interlocutor between those clubs, those stadiums, the league office, but also our law enforcement and corporate partners. So if you take Super Bowl, for instance, in the past, those corporate partners would show up. They would have some engagement with the league, but they wouldn't fully understand what was going on. The GSOC really fills that information gap for them. And we can also connect those guys to law enforcement resources because they're our partners.
Isn't it funny how people look to promote themselves running on fields with social media being what it is? The mindset of an influencer or internet celebrity or whatever they may call themselves these days is so interesting. They don't even think or care that there's an analyst team behind the scenes that is actually monitoring for these types of actions and shenanigans as they think about jumping over a wall to run onto the field and high five a player or just run across the 50.
No, you're right, Neil. I don't understand the logic behind that because the moment you do that, you get apprehended by law enforcement, and yeah, you might get a bunch of views on TikTok and Instagram, but now everyone knows who you are, and you end up putting yourself likely to get banned from that facility, potentially banned from all league games, and maybe for the views it's worth it, but it's a silly thing that puts them at risk. It obviously puts our players and everyone else at risk as well, and that's not, even if this was not a COVID environment, it is still a risky scenario because no one knows what the intentions are, right? So right. All of that has to be treated with the same level of care, no matter what, and at the bottom line is should not be happening.
Right. So you mentioned that you kind of called yourselves the hub of all things in all of these groups. So maybe you can kind of start by talking a little bit about the GSOC and what it looks like. And what's the structure of it? How is it built? Because it serves so many groups within the community, and law enforcement and all these other organizations sponsored. You mentioned corporate sponsors of the Super Bowl. There's supporting so many. What does that structure look like, and how do you utilize it for the different situations?
So we're quite fortunate. We're actually one of the few GSOCs that kind of is a marriage of physical, cyber, and intelligence capabilities. So we address all those things. So there's a cyber component, cyber/security operations team that monitors the networks, looks for cyber risks and issues, and then you have the more or less the combination of league staff and Crisis 24 staff who make up our intelligence team. So that group essentially serves as the primary conduit for all other issues outside of cyber. And even if a cyber issue comes through, because of our partnership, that gets cascaded to our cyber team. But our intelligence team really handles physical security incidents, and that could be someone trespassing into a location, to an employee just needs assistance on something or something weird is going on, all the way to providing intelligence support to every league game event. And what that is that, whether that's, threat monitoring during our games and events, coordinating and collaborating with our local, state, and federal partners, or providing threat assessments. And the threat assessments can be specific to an event, like a Super Bowl draft, or there could be, travel risk assessments. Before COVID, teams used to go out and do a variety of different things internationally. And I think just recently they had released kind of like different markets that teams would be going into that are very much global. You have some in Australia, Brazil, Germany, and things like that. So if there's places where individual had not been before, we would actually provide them safety and travel assessments. When we say all the things, it truly is all the things. And, we are fortunate. Our team's not very big. So I think in total on the intelligence side, including me, we have 8 personnel, and it's almost literally split down the middle between Crisis 24 staff and onboard league staff. But despite all the things that we have to tackle, and I would say on average, we're probably easily doing 50 to 60 different things throughout the week. We just happen to have a very good staff and committed team that I would say is lightning in a bottle, because it's not easy to be able to juggle all those things, and you have to be nimble and dynamic and open for kind of growth in order to continually combat the various challenges and new kind of questions that we have to answer for our consumers.
Rob, so given your previous role in the FBI over emerging technologies, I would suspect that tech plays a big role in what you're doing within the GSOC and within the NFL. So maybe you can touch a little bit on the technology side of what you're doing.
Yeah, so it goes in 2 ways, and it actually is very similar to my time in the FBI. I would say my last 2 jobs in FBI, it's very applicable. One, the management of tools and capabilities, so understanding what's effective and what's not, whether that's for the emergency communication side or for our threat monitoring side, thinking about the integration of those platforms, and really thinking about as a SOC, how do you future-proof your technology and really It's kind of hard to do, but a lot of it is keeping it simple and ensuring that they have the ability to kind of integrate and talk to each other. When it comes to the emerging tech, and it's definitely become more of a thing now. I mean, if you look at the way the world is, even with the league, something like NFTs, which has now become this major investment thing at the club and league level. When you're capturing these moments that are now worth money. If you ask most folks inside the league a year prior, they probably had no idea what that was. A lot of stadiums, are integrating 5G. I was a 5G expert, but it also comes with vulnerabilities. And you just recently saw in the news that, there's a lot of concerns over its rollout near airports. That has a direct impact on our team movements and our staff movements, if flights get delayed or folks choose not to do that. Lots of the discussion about, cryptocurrency and blockchain and stuff. All of the things that, I had to study is becoming used in a practical environment now. And as a GSOC, one of the other things that we deal with is really looking at the impact of those emerging trends and really, what is the benefit of a lot of things, because it's not all bad, but also what are the inhibitors, and also how can bad actors exploit those things and potentially victimize our staff or players or teams.
Rob, when we look at those emerging trends, if you will, what would you say of those trends evolve to the most significant risks that your team focuses on a day-to-day or month-to-month? And, certainly appreciating 2020 and how the league's GSOC, pivoted in a lot of different ways. We're coming out of that now, right? It's less of a virtual world, for the league itself. With 2021 season just, coming to an end soon enough, what would you say the biggest significant risks were, over the last season, and what do you expect or suspect may come forward?
Yeah, wow. That's a very hard question. But I think the biggest things come down to, fan and player safety. So I would say 2020 definitely escalated the rise of, not rise, it was always there, but online threats. There was a lot of folks who were kind of sitting at home and, they had nothing but time to, do a lot of heckling of players and their family. We saw two real world examples, organizations, individuals trying to either put players at risk or staff at risk by throwing items onto the field and stuff like that. I think the harmless emerging technology actually becomes a safety issue for fans and players as well. Drones being the most prevalent. There's drones are easily brought off the shelf now. They're commercially available to literally anyone. And I know this season we've come across numerous issues in which fans from the tailgate area will fly a drone over the stadium harmlessly, thinking that there's no big deal. But if there's folks inside that location and that drone drops, that could be an injury to anyone inside the ball, injury to a player, all of that stuff, and you just don't know again what the intention is of folks who are doing those kind of things. I think we're in an age of augmented reality where it's possible to or deep fakes, when it's possible to have, employees or players say something that is controversial that they did not say. The other thing is misinformation. It's funny. One of the things that we did notice during 2020 as if there was something that was presumed to be controversial, a lot of bots would pick up on that and completely continue to amplify that message to all the news agencies and what have you. And there's often times where we have to tamp down misinformation or disinformation, and those things have a huge impact on the brand. I think if 2020, 2021 brought anything forward is the fact that your brand reputation can rise and fall at a moment's notice, and it doesn't take too much. So if there's disinformation, misinformation that's out there and it's being amplified, you're spending more time trying to spin that down. And at that point, it's already in the hands of public opinion. Even if the facts don't support it, it's already too late.
Well, thank you for all that. Appreciate it. Rob, one other item that is, for me personally, of a big interest, and I'm sure many fans out there, right, is, the league extended the season an extra week, which is to this year and of course for years going forward to continue the growth of the international presence, right? Mexico City, London, looking at Germany and probably other countries to host games. Of course, having the combines in Africa for player development, et cetera. I mean, who knows where this could go? How do you see your role and the GSOC's role evolving, to continue supporting that global footprint through the years?
It just makes our role more critical. Not that we weren't critical before, because anytime you expand your reach, you're expanding your risk profile. And there's a lot of locations that the league in the past didn't traditionally operate in. So I think for the general public, it's pretty obvious that a majority of our operations are stateside. So we know that environment. We know that environment quite well. We've got to a point now because we've done it multiple years. We understand the UK. We understand Mexico City. We have the connectivity there. We have the law enforcement connections there. We have the public safety connections in general. We know how to move our folks in and out of those areas. And it's even if something I guess elevated is going on, we know those environments. As we continue to expand out, a lot of our staff members, our clubs, ownership really don't understand some of those other new environments. So as we expand out to Germany, for instance, we will be building relationships from scratch, and we won't fully have a historical understanding of dynamics and what happens if X occurs,
Right.
Whether that is an active shooter or, we're in a very finicky environment with COVID lockdowns. What do we do if a lockdown happens and, some of our staff are stuck in certain locations? So this really, I think, from the GSOC perspective, hardens the resolve and the purpose as to why we exist, because we are literally the only ones who are postured inside the league to be able to look globally and really look at the implications and provide that warning and insight into the different things that are going on. I think it actually pushes the GSOC into those more traditional intelligence roles where, the intelligence team gets smart on those countries and those regions, understands, kind of all of the dynamics that go on. And as our folks are planning for those events, we're the ones who can inform on things that we're seeing or some issues that we need to address before we host an event or a venue in a new location.
So it's hard to believe that it's only been around for 3 years, right? There's been a lot going on in those 3 years. So in a previous podcast, we had a conversation about the definition of duty of care and how organizations have really kind of changed that definition and what their responsibilities are and how far they go along that spectrum of care for the people, for the operations. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, with COVID being 2 of your 3 years, it really made changes happen very, very quickly and dynamically. Maybe share a little bit about what's different now when you think about duty of care, when you had really that vision and that mission in 2018 to what you're doing today as a program.
Well, I guess to start things off on that, the good news is because we are still new, we didn't have any true preconceived notions as a GSOC as to what that was. I think at the time that the league's definition of duty of care was obviously when we're hosting events, venues, our folks are traveling from point A to point B. That was something that we had to maintain a presence on, and I think the 2019 season really indexed on that. Like, hey, we have folks moving from point B and supportive stuff. We obviously have to make sure that those folks are safe and protected. When 2020 happened, it completely changed the understanding of what duty of care meant, because so many different new things were going on that I would say we had never experienced before as an organization. So suddenly the GSOC was responsible for tracking all things COVID across the globe, and what restrictions and what guidance was going out everywhere. and that wasn't a traditional function, I think, of most GSOCs going into that year. We ended up picking up that tab. Then it was kind of the question on, okay, so when is it that we notify folks on changes of things that are going on? So a perfect example, during the height of civil unrest in 2020, we were starting to kick off that season. So there was some staff members who had to go from their homes into our NFL Films building. And at the time, because of civil unrest, like Philadelphia, I shut down for half our staff. They had to transit from where they were past a lot of the major roadways that go through Philadelphia. So now the GSOC was in charge of alerting to those kind of changes because it impacted their ability to go from point A to point B. Now we're at a point, particularly in this digital environment, where if someone receives something at home that's a threat and they're a staff member or a player or whatnot, that now has fallen into our duty of care. So I would say duty of care has now gone into this all-encompassing, all threats, all hazards thing. That's a gray area, not just for us, but I think for many GSOCs, because it continues to expand and shrink depending on what's going on. And that's kind of, for our GSOC, put us in a position in which we truly had to be nimble and kind of open and really drive how we're going to be doing that stuff like that, as opposed to, waiting for the winds to shift, because there's so many different things that are going on. Unless you're really in charge of how that duty of care is going to play out, you end up, you can't be everywhere at once, so you have to be able to be very smart with your resources. And I would suspect that as an environment continues to get more dynamic, that duty of care is really going to grow, exponentially. I guess the most recent example will be Hurricane Ida. So Hurricane Ida came through. I think for the public side, they knew that Saints were not able to operate out of their stadium because it hit Louisiana first. But what folks didn't pay attention to were some of the side impacts that happened in the Northeast. Our league office is in the Northeast. NFL Films is up there in the Northeast. And I know from my own experience, half Philadelphia was underwater. And then we had kind of once in a millennium number of tornadoes that came through, some near our NFL Films office. And then there was a host of other things that were impediments for employee safety on their transit to work. We had to hop into the breach and kind of push out those notifications, so HR can make the decisions and inform employees like, hey, it's not safe for you to come in today, operate, remotely, stuff like that. So it's a hard thing to nail down. And I would imagine that challenge exists for everyone at this point.
Sure. And I think it just helps, like you said, just staying in that space of being very dynamic and changing, and that line between, when you're in season and off season, responsibility doesn't change. There might be a little bit of a shift of what the focus is, but at the end of the day, your presence in the communities are just as strong off season as they are during the football season.
No, 100%. I guess if I could make an analogy, it's like being a parent. Like no matter if kids are in school or not in school, or whatnot, you still have to do your job to keep folks safe, and that is very much, I think, the role of the GSOC.
Rob, with the involvement of the GSOC and the GSOC supporting all of those different anomalies that the world is throwing out at us. I have to imagine that Chief Lanier is uber excited with where this was 3.5 years ago, right? With an office space acting as the GSOC at NFL headquarters, to the GSOC physically being built out and the presence that it brings for your team, and of course league executives coming in to understand what you're covering and supporting across the bandwidth, right? So I'm sure she's really happy and excited to see the vision come true.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Chief Lanier had pushed his concept since she joined the league, and I think at the time it wasn't really a tangible concept. And maybe the NFL is one of the luckiest organizations on the planet because, by the time it finally was approved and the concept went into implementation, year one we were definitely finding our sea legs, and building the space and building the team essentially, really trying to understand, how the GSOC could support all the things. But then her concept was put to the ultimate test, and a hopefully once in a lifetime pandemic, where not only did you have a health issue that was going on, you had a host that were happening across the environment as folks were being locked down, and it really, I think, it presented to all the C-suite all of the hazards and risks that were kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, the world outside the window before. Like all this stuff had a direct impact on everyone's health and safety, and now you actually have a component and an element that can inform on all those things and prepare you and arm you with the right information to make your things successful. So I think our evolution happened at the right time, but it also, we had trial by fire, like in a true fire, because I will say, there's other GSOCs who weren't so successful, and they weren't ready for this kind of environment. We were just fortunate to have such a highly capable and motivated team. And we also had a great blend of folks with new ideas, and fresh eyes, and folks who come from environments that are high intensity, like even myself, most of my experience is high intensity environments where everyone's going crazy, and you're kind of that calm in a storm. So that the combination of those experiences, I think, got us through that summer. But also, we learned a ton about everything, because instead of us, hunting down everyone was coming to us for assistance.
Yeah, I mean, for all those experiences that you guys have encountered over the last 3 years, there's got to be one item that repeatedly keeps you up at night, right? And that's everyone's favorite question. What keeps you up at night? But there's got to be something that is the same thing over and over that, you lose some winks, through the days.
That's hard. I think for us, it would be the inability to keep our consumers safe, and the folks that we're deemed to support. And that could be a variety of different things. I mean, no one saw all of the things that 2020 brought, or even, some of the cascading stuff that came to 2021. And, I think the most catastrophic thing that could possibly happen for us as an event where, a lot of fans or players, whatever, hurt or injured or worse, and we could have prevented that. So I think that drives the entirety of the team. I know at least half the team was around when 9/11 happened, and I think we all made, solemn vows that something like that would never happen again, as long as we were, had something to do with it, and that could prevent it. And I think that very much kind of pushes us, like, at the end of the day, we do whatever it takes to keep everyone safe.
And we appreciate that.
Absolutely. So why do you think the program's been successful? So if you could narrow it down to a couple of items, why do you think that you all have been successful to this point? And your reasoning might change in the next 3 years, but for the first 3 years, looking back, why do you think everything has gone so well, beyond Chief Lanier sitting in the front seat picking you out of the GSX conference?
I will say it's been not only circumstance, but the fact that we have talented folks. So, the circumstances proved the concept to be something meaningful, where I knew going into the 2020 year, there were still questions on, like, that's cool and all, but do we really need this? And, when, 2020 happened and everything started falling apart, we stepped up and performed. If we stepped up and failed, this whole concept, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now. I might be dressed as Optimus Prime on the Las Vegas Strip somewhere. But because we were able to step up and execute on so many different things and be very, very successful and step into the breach, that gave us the bona fides that we needed, to really like grow the program. And, our disadvantage in year one is we didn't know anyone. We didn't know any of the business units. We didn't know who's who in the zoo. We didn't know who made what decisions or who needed to know what information. But because of, our role in really shepherding a lot of folks through a very trying time, all of those business units started coming to us, for them to help, and they would explain, like, hey, this is what we do, and we would explain, well, this is what we did. I think something that really helped during that trying time was an old school government thing, which is just a brown bag. So one of the things for I think our business units, because what we do is not traditional for their spaces. If I'm a marketing person, I'm not really super concerned about a security operations center. So what we were able to do is through those brown bags, just explain in simple terms, this is what we do. This is how we support you guys. We actually want to learn about what you guys do, and we can figure out how we could plug in and provide you guys support. So one of the things I did not, talk about earlier is like one of our biggest wins was the ability to do what we call due diligence, risk mitigation reviews on talent or corporations or anyone else who wants to work with league during our events, and essentially identifying potential issues before they occur. And that's been a service that we generated that it now is a constant across all business units, to include vendors that we're thinking about employing and really trying to identify risks, potential fraud issues, things that could hurt the brand. And really at the end of the day, that underlying things, if you take security as an umbrella out of that equation, the one thing folks do care about is brand reputation, and our ability to really impact that and be good stewards in that space has really, I think, pushed our momentum to the next level, to the point that we have trust in the community. And it's not just from our internal league business partners and our stadium and club partners, but also with the law enforcement community as well. We do a lot of work with our fusion centers. There's law enforcement that support each of our games, and we have connectivity with all those folks. And then more importantly, during our big special events, some because of background, we have folks who used to be on the other side of the aisle, but others it's because we are good stewards, and we do a lot of work to like, hey, we're not trying to, street battle anyone. We want to be as collaborative and open as possible. And I would argue, because of that efforts, we probably have some of the best relationships out of any of the sports organizations that are out there today, because we're constantly talking to them on and off season.
Yeah, we've had previous conversations, both in podcasts and webinars, about the importance of those relationships at the law enforcement level. And we make those recommendations all the time to organizations, corporations, schools, like get those relationships formed, because it becomes a two-way street and you really help each other in that presence within the community. It's incredibly important.
No, absolutely. I think one of the benefits that we do is that we make it a partnership. It's not just like, oh, we need something, help us out.
Right. Two-way.
We do some different things that, like for instance, every week we have an assessment that goes out that includes our law enforcement partners on things that we are expecting to have. We have an open chat with our partners, every Monday, Thursday, Sunday, sometimes Saturdays if there's games going on, and we're able to share real-time information and deconflict. So, because we're so open about our operations, it gives them a level of comfort, that we're not trying to hide the ball or do something weird and crazy. And we approach things with a reasonable, kind of standard of how we look at threats and how we address all those things. So I think just that level of transparency and that just spirit of teamwork is really giving us that buy-in from those folks.
Sure. Where do you see the program and your mission going in the next couple of years? How do you see it changing?
I guess, I think when I look at any Intel program or any operations center, I think the foundation is critical. So we've spent the past 2 to 3 years building a very solid foundation of our capabilities and what we're able to do. Where I see us going is actually where we already have the momentum towards right now, when we're integrated with every single operation that's going on from the beginning, and informing on every single thing that the league is contemplating doing, and at least be able to present the potential risks or things to consider to make better decisions. So we've gotten a lot of momentum behind us right now, where we are at a lot of places, but the league is so expansive, and all the things that the league wants to do are everywhere. And every business unit has a bunch of ambitious things. So there's still a lot of work to be done on how we continue to grow and expand that. I also see us as kind of that hub for all corporate partners, just because we have a reach that is pretty significant. So as we expand internationally, is also going to expand our international partnerships with other corporations, or even more stateside GSOCs who have operations, hotels, or anything else in the areas we're going to be operating in. So I see the GSOC becoming more and more part of the NFL's lifeblood, and being that critical partner. We might not be on the front. We're not the happy movie trailer stuff for football games and whatnot, but we're the ones that protect it. And I think the growth in that space is going to be continual. But I feel like at 3 years in, we're in such an incredible position that we can really just continue to go full steam ahead and ensure anything the league is doing is safe.
Excellent. Well, Rob, I on behalf of Crisis 24 and all of our listeners, Neil, as my co-host, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. This has been incredible, and we are confident that Chief Lanier made the right decision, and there's a reason why you have all the roles that you do within the NFL. Special thanks to Neil Sachs, my co-host, and all of the listeners for joining us on this episode. The big game is coming up on February 13th, so I think we all have a much better understanding of the enormous effort underway and all the work that you and your team are going to be doing from a risk perspective from this point forward. If you like what you've heard, don't forget to subscribe to the Risk Insight podcast, and you'll be notified of all new episodes. Until next time, I'm Mo French. Be well and make a difference every day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Risk Insight. Please subscribe to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And for more information on today's topic, please visit us on the web at crisis24.com.